Most people think fear arrives loudly. For me, it started with a single photograph that shouldn't have existed. 3 years ago, my cousin Aaron invited me on a weekend photography trip deep in northern Pennsylvania. He'd recently gotten obsessed with abandoned places and wanted to explore an old mining town hidden somewhere in the mountains. At the time, I desperately needed a distraction. My life had become a total grind. Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. So when Aaron said he found a forgotten ghost town surrounded by forest, I was down almost immediately. There were 4 of us going. Me, Aaron, his girlfriend Claire, and one of Aaron's co-workers named Derek. I'd never met Derek before the trip. Aaron described him as quiet but chill. That should have been the first red flag. Looking back now, every terrible thing started the moment Derek hopped into the car. The drive took almost 6 hours. Most of the trip was normal enough. Claire talked non-stop, Aaron kept showing us photos of abandoned buildings he wanted to visit, and Derek mostly spaced out, staring out the window silently. Every once in a while he'd randomly drop some sus questions. What's the creepiest thing you've ever seen? Do you think people can straight up disappear without anyone noticing? Would you recognize danger immediately if it looked normal? At first we laughed those questions off. They sounded like typical horror movie cliches. But Derek never laughed with us afterward. He'd just sit there quietly like he was vibing on our reactions. By sunset we reached the mountains. The ghost town sat several miles beyond the nearest road. Most buildings were totally trashed from age, and trees had grown through parts of the streets themselves. The place looked frozen in time. Aaron was hyped. We rented a tiny cabin nearby since hiking back before dark would have been a hard no. The owner gave us one important warning before handing over the keys. If you hear noises outside after midnight, ignore them. Aaron thought it was Cap, a total joke. Claire rolled her eyes. Derek smiled for the first time all day. That smile weirded me out immediately. It wasn't excitement. It looked more like recognition. The cabin itself felt ancient. Floorboards creaked constantly, and the lights flickered every few minutes whenever the wind picked up outside. Still, we tried to keep it real. We cooked dinner, unpacked camera gear, and planned the next morning's route. Then Aaron started reviewing the photos he'd taken earlier. At first the pictures looked fire. Rusted buildings. Empty streets. Fog drifting between trees. Typical aesthetic abandoned town stuff. But then he stopped scrolling. One image showed Claire standing near an old church smiling toward the camera. Behind her, barely visible inside the church doorway, stood a tall figure wearing dark clothing. Nobody remembered seeing anyone there. Aaron zoomed in further. The figure looked blurry, almost stretched unnaturally. Claire tried to play it off, saying maybe another tourist wandered nearby. But nobody else had been there all afternoon. Derek quietly asked to see the picture again. He stared at it much longer than the rest of us did. Then he said something that sent chills down my spine. That's closer than before. The room went dead silent. Aaron asked what he meant, but Derek just shrugged and said he was trolling. Nobody really believed him though. Around 2 in the morning I woke up needing water. Derek's mattress was empty. At first I assumed he was in the bathroom. Then I heard movement outside. Slow footsteps crunching through the snow. I peeked carefully through the window. Derek stood maybe 30 feet away facing the forest completely motionless. And he wasn't alone anymore. Another person stood several feet behind him near the trees. Tall, thin, completely still. I immediately woke Aaron. By the time he looked outside, both figures were gone. We searched the entire property with flashlights but found zero except footprints leading toward the woods. One set belonged to Derek. The other set was straight-up nightmare fuel. The prints were unusually deep and narrow, almost like someone walked barefoot through the snow. The next morning, the vibes were off. Nobody really trusted Derek anymore, but we still had almost an entire day before checkout. Aaron insisted we check out the mining tunnels because they were the main attraction. Honestly, I regret giving in. The deeper we walked, the colder everything became. Even our flashlights seemed sketchy down there. Claire eventually noticed strange markings covering sections of the tunnel walls. Some looked brand new. Then Claire stopped walking suddenly. She pointed toward the tunnel floor. Fresh footprints covered the dirt. Bare footprints. Exactly like the ones outside the cabin. The terrifying part was realizing those prints were heading toward us, not away. Before anyone could react, something moved deeper in the tunnel. Aaron called out asking if someone was there. No answer came back. Instead we heard breathing. Slow, uneven, wet. Claire started losing it. Derek looked completely paralyzed beside me. Then, in barely more than a whisper, he said, "It followed me here." We booked it. Nobody spoke. Nobody stopped. We sprinted all the way back to the cabin while snow hammered the trees. Once inside, Derek finally spilled the tea. Weeks before the trip, he'd visited the ghost town alone. He claimed he saw someone watching him through a window. Since then, he'd started noticing the same figure appearing in reflections and distant photographs. At first he thought he was tripping. Then the photographs started changing. Each time the figure appeared, it looked slightly closer. Aaron called him straight crazy. Claire wanted to call the cops. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. The drive home felt endless. About halfway home, Aaron suddenly slammed on the brakes. His hands were shaking violently. He turned the camera screen toward us silently. The last photo taken inside the tunnel had captured all four of us running toward the exit. And directly behind Derek, something tall was reaching out from the darkness. Some things don't chase you immediately. They wait to be invited closer. Aaron scrubbed every image from that trip the second we got home. Derek ghosted everyone 2 weeks later. I haven't spoken to him since. But sometimes late at night, I still think about that final photograph. Because the thing in the tunnel wasn't looking at Derek. It was staring directly into the camera. The scariest things are the ones that notice you back.